in January of 2012, there was an internal communication from a mid-level bureaucrat at Georgia Perimeter College saying, what in the world is going on? There are $10 million, in quotes, gone with no explanation from Georgia Perimeter's reserves. And this is at a time after the recession of 2008, where most schools in the university system were suffering financially, having a very hard time meeting their budgets. The Perimeter had actually built up a large reserve under President TRICOLLI, a $20 million reserve in 2009 that was secretly being evaporated to cover financial shortfalls in the rest of the university system. So this email goes out saying, what in the world is going on? $10 million is gone with no explanation. That created this flurry of internal communications in the Vice President of Finance office at Georgia Perimeter College between them and finance officials in the university system of Georgia that oversees all the colleges and universities in Georgia. None of those communications went to the rest of the Georgia Perimeter College administration, including Anthony TRICOLLI. That caused the need to create an explanation of why there was $10 million gone with no explanation. In fact, there had never has to this day been an explanation of where that $10 million went. But Anthony TRICOLLI was fired as a scapegoat for that missing money. Since then, since we originally filed a RICO action against state officials in the university system and the Attorney General's office, alleging with documents that they had actually falsified the financials of Georgia Perimeter College and the university system to hide these financial transgressions, which is a felony by itself. But we alleged in a RICO action that they had falsified the finances to hide the misappropriation of millions of dollars in the university system. They have defended that suit for the last 6 years, claiming that they have sovereign immunity protection to commit felony falsification of state agency reports to conceal the theft of taxpayer money. That is the state of Georgia's position. And of course, we have been fighting that. And despite their stonewalling, they won't let us do discovery. They won't answer subpoenas. They won't answer open records requests. But we have discovered why the $10 million was missing from Georgia Perimeter College's reserves. And the university system was basically running a check kiting scheme, funneling money out of Georgia Perimeter College's reserves around the university system in order to meet the financial requirements for federal reaccreditation to qualify for federal assistance. So there were obviously billions of dollars annually at stake for the university system in this financial fraud.
It's clear that they scapegoated me. Even the legislatures, some of the legislatures knew that I was being scapegoated and wrote articles about the scapegoating of Anthony TRICOLLI. It was clear that they did that to me, yes.
There was never any formal accusation against Dr. TRICOLLI. What the university system did, and they've done this in other cases with Dr. Papp at Kennesaw State and other places, where they drip out insinuations in the press. So they planted articles in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that said, for example, that Anthony TRICOLLI had dipped into the reserves of Georgia Perimeter and things like that. They never formally charged him of anything. Board of Regents policy requires them, if they fire a president, to give a formal statement of charges and to give the president a hearing. And they evaded all of that. So they did character assassination in the press, but they never formally charged him with any wrongdoing, financial or otherwise. Well, they actually made contradictory claims. The chancellor at the time, Hank Huckabee, explained it to Anthony by saying that the board of every year, the Board of Regents, they have an annual reappointment process where they reappoint or don't reappoint all of the college and university presidents. So Chancellor Huckabee claimed that that the board had not reappointed Anthony. The fact is that, which you've discovered, despite the state's attempts to hide all this, that Anthony had already been fired and replaced before the board ever met. Anthony actually was no longer president of Georgia Perimeter College. They had appointed the Dean of Academic Affairs, Alan Jackson, as acting president without even informing Anthony. Then the board met. They presented a different candidate besides Anthony. Anthony was already gone without knowing it. And then Chancellor Huckabee turned around and claimed, well, the board didn't reappoint you. That was all to avoid the hearing required if they fired him. So they tried to pretend they did not reappoint him. Actually, Anthony's name was never put up for reappointment, and he had already been fired, which entitled him to a hearing before the Board of Regents ever met, which is a very, furtive and kind of insidious ruse that they committed.
Yeah, what Stephen said is exactly what happened. And the annual contract was just that, an annual contract. We were told that come the end of April, if April 30th, we weren't informed that it was automatically, May 1, automatically renewed. That did not happen in my case.
And if I can jump in, Anthony wasn't just told that. Those were Board of Regents policies that governed so Anthony had a written contract with the state that specifically said it was governed by Board of Regents policies. So in this effort to, not only to fire Anthony, but to prevent him from bringing a lawsuit, the Board of Regents and the Attorney General have actually done everything in their power to evade the Board of Regents policies that apply to this situation, including the policy on reappointment and the policy on giving him a hearing.
According to my contract, April 30th, they should have notified me one way or the other.
Yeah.
And they didn't notify me, it was automatic.
Yeah, the Board of Regents required Anthony to be, the Board of Regents policy required him to be notified if he were not reappointed by the time of the Regents' April board meeting, which I think that year was around April 10 or so. And the Regents' policy at that time said if they took no action, then he was basically automatically president. And they didn't follow either one of those policies. Part of their camouflage deception after the fact, the Regents went back and changed both of those policies after the fact to correspond to what they actually did as opposed to the policies that were in place at the time. Well, the big announcement of the deficit happened on April 26. And of course, that was, so to give you a little bit of a timeline, there were memos from the vice presidents of finance at Georgia Perimeter College to the university system in March saying we have big problems. So first there was the January email where the guy said there's $10 million gone with no explanation. What's going on? In March, the vice president of finance at Georgia Perimeter reported to the university system and Board of Regents, but not to Anthony TRICOLLI, and that's undisputed. Reported at that time a $13.7 million deficit. The only reason is to scapegoat Anthony TRICOLLI.
Exactly. A very good question, to which the answer is to scapegoat me, to put the blame of the problem on my shoulders instead of his. Well, I'm not sure because I didn't know. I didn't know about it until the 27th. I learned, or the 26th. I learned about it 1 million at a time as the vice president came in my office and said, we have a problem. We're 1 million in the red. And I'm like, it's no problem. We have $200 million. We can find $1 million. Just cancel some POs. And then he came to my office 4 or 5 hours later and said, it's not 1 million, it's 2 million. And I'm like, no big deal. And then he came to my office a few hours later and he said it was 4 million. And I said, we got a problem. So I said, let's contact my friends downtown at the system office. Big mistake. They already knew, of course. So I was contacting my enemies that already knew what had transpired. And they came back after supposedly studying the books for the night. They found 16.5 million in the red. And when I looked at Ron, all Ron could say was, I'm sorry, Dr. T, I'm sorry. And I got blamed for everything.
Let me put all that in a date perspective. In March of 2012, the Vice President of Finance, Ron Caruth, reported to the university system, but not to Anthony, that there was approximately a $14 million deficit. On April 15, Ron Caruth reported to Anthony that the same, after reporting a deficit to the university system, on April 15, Ron Caruth repeated his continued assertions that the finances were sound and there was actually a very large deficit, a very large surplus at Georgia Perimeter College. So on April 15, Ron Caruth is still reporting a surplus to Anthony TRICOLLI while reporting a $14 million deficit to the university system. On April 25, the conversation Anthony's talking about, Ron Caruth comes in and says, Anthony, I know I just told you 10 days ago that we had a, multi-million-dollar surplus, but now I'm telling you we have like $1 million deficit, or maybe it's 2 million, or maybe it's 4 million. So Anthony calls the university system and says, like as it was his duty, to send in auditors to find out what in the heck was going on. The USG auditors claim that by going over the books overnight, they discovered a roughly $14 million deficit. That was actually the deficit that had been reported to them a month earlier. And this is all documented. And of course, we have the documents. We made open records requests for the same documents, and the university system would not produce them. No, the Attorney General admits he's never investigated any of it. Their assertion has been that we cannot have a trial, we cannot do discovery, because they have sovereign immunity to commit felony falsification of state agency financial records to conceal the theft and other misappropriation of taxpayer funds in the millions of dollars. And of course, that's all an obstruction attempt to prevent this evidence from ever being presented at a trial to a jury. That's all we want, is to be able to take the evidence that we have, go to a jury, let Anthony tell his story, let us present the documentation that is mostly from the state's own records, and let a jury decide. And the state of Georgia does not want that to ever happen. Well, the courts have stonewalled us at every stage. So originally, Anthony's case was dismissed on grounds of sovereign immunity. They said, we have sovereign immunity to commit these crimes. You can't sue us. I filed a motion to set aside that judgment on two grounds. One is constitutional due process. While they're claiming they have sovereign immunity, there's actually a Georgia Supreme Court case from 1984 directly on point that says they do not. And the Georgia Constitution says that Georgia Supreme Court cases are binding. They are ignoring that case. The Attorney General has never mentioned that case in a brief. No court has ever mentioned it in an order. So there's a constitutional due process violation with Georgia's, avoiding its own statutes and binding Supreme Court decisions. I also based the motion to set aside based on the new evidence of fraud in state government that we discovered, that it wasn't a matter of just $10 million missing, that it was actually a matter of billions of dollars in accreditation fraud, for which the state could be liable for receiving federal assistance by falsifying the state university system's financials. Theoretically, the state could be responsible to repay all those billions of dollars. And we filed that into court on April 1 of 2019. The Attorney General Chris Carr has never to this day responded to that pleading. Well, we know that that is from Georgia Perimeter College alone. We know at the time that, and this is admitted in state records and by university system officials at the time, that most university system schools were struggling in the red at the time, and very few of them actually met the federal requirements for reaccreditation in order to receive federal aid. When you're talking about the federal aid to the university system, you're not talking about a piddling $10 million. You're losing billions of dollars. Well, and we know that, for example, the $10 million from Georgia Perimeter College was double counted. It may have been triple counted, quadruple counted. We don't know how many schools in the system that they may have, counted that $10 million.
I'd worked hard my entire career to build the career that I built and to build the reputation that I built. I just want that reputation back. I don't want the job back. I don't want to ever work for the University System of Georgia ever again. And Steve Wrigley is the most corrupt person I've ever met in all of my years of higher education work. So I don't want to go back to Georgia. I'm happy to be retired as I am. Unfortunately, I'm ill and struggling with that.
Not only a matter of destroying, Anthony's good reputation, but his career in higher education was destroyed. He was never able. He was a young, vibrant, energetic, dynamic college president at the time this happened, with lots of prospects nationwide, including being mentioned as the next president of the University of Georgia, which of course the major flagship institution in this state. After Anthony was falsely tarred the way he was never able to get another job in higher education again. The motion to set aside the judgment that I mentioned, the Georgia Court of Appeals refused to review the substance of the motion. The Georgia Supreme Court refused to review any of this. The Georgia Supreme Court technically can do that. I have argued that they cannot because the decision against Anthony is in conflict with a binding Georgia Supreme Court precedent that says that Georgia state officials do not have sovereign immunity protection against RICO felonies. There was a case in 1984 where Labor Commissioner Sam Caldwell was committing extortion and bribery and stealing funds, and a civil RICO action was brought against him. He said, "You can't bring a civil RICO action against me because I'm a state official." The Georgia Supreme Court said, yes, we can, because the Georgia RICO statute expressly authorizes that remedy against a state official. So the sovereign immunity they're claiming in Anthony's case is completely and directly contradicted by a Georgia Supreme Court decision. So I argued to the Georgia Supreme Court, you cannot just say we have the discretion to deny cert and fail to review this case, because it is in direct conflict with the Georgia Constitution. And you can't just, you're violating your oath of office to uphold the Constitution if you just say, well, we're going to let that slide. So I maintain they had no discretion to refuse review. They refused review because they cannot explain, why. The Georgia Supreme Court has been a big proponent of sovereign immunity protection. They have expanded it to incredible degrees, saying that a state agency cannot be held accountable for not following the law that it's supposed to uphold. They said you can't challenge the constitutionality of a state statute because sovereign immunity prevents that. So now they're saying that the modern current Georgia Supreme Court is saying that state officials have sovereign immunity protection to commit major RICO felonies. They can falsify state agency finances in order to divert millions of dollars, to commit billions of dollars of fraud on the federal government. and they have sovereign immunity protection for that, even though there is a Georgia Supreme Court decision directly on point that says that they do not.